I just feel like there is, a lot of hopelessness these days. And on this podcast, it's not the vibe I get. I feel like the content is very hopeful, and it's like, wow, people are really taking things into their own hands. They're having these learning experiences. They're cultivating these like different crops. It's a really different tone from what I'm used to hearing, and I find that from an outside perspective, it is so empowering to hear people talk about the work they're doing.
Welcome to episode 50 of the Seed Farmer Podcast. 50 episodes. Can you believe that? I barely can. Anyway, this is the podcast where I want you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it to be a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support podcast. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Turnesol Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. In today's minisode, we go behind the scenes for a special 50th anniversary episode. But first, news. The first news is that I was emailing with Benjamin Waltner, who uses the farm spreadsheets from my crop planning course, and we were exchanging about tweaking some of the harvest sheets and, just modifying them. And I guess I should say that I have extended the registration for the crop planning course by 1 week, mostly because I didn't have time to close the registration page over the weekend, and I thought, I'll just leave it up another week. So there it is. If you still want to register, you can. But anyway, Benjamin and I were emailing about the harvest sheets when Benjamin added a PS to one of the emails, and I wanted to share that PS with you. So he wrote, PS, I got the Seed Farmer book this year from my uncle, who is a passionate retired farmer himself. I started reading it. I like your motivating style and how you get me to not to overthink or overplan, but just start doing it and refine it afterwards and go deeper. Thank you. I really love hearing how folks are enjoying the Seed Farmer book and how they're approaching it. If you've enjoyed the book, I'd love to hear about it. And of course, you can leave reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. Apparently, having reviews in those places is good for promoting the book, but you can really talk about it anywhere you want, as much as you want. Now, what's going on at Turnesol Farm? I want to tell you about some birdhouse gourds that we grew in 2024. We've dabbled a couple times with growing a few plants of gourds over the years, but in 2024, we decided to do a full season grow out. We grew them in a greenhouse for that extra heat that cucurbits love, and we trellised them on single lines of baler twine that was hanging from the rafters, and these gourds just went everywhere. If you've ever grown birdhouse gourds, you probably know what I'm talking about. They just took over that part of the greenhouse. Considering the amount of plant mass, there was not that many fruits. If this was earlier in my farming career, I may have been disappointed with how few fruits there were on these plants. But what I've learned over the years from cucurbits is that there are almost always more fruit than you can see. And was this ever true with those birdhouse gourds? At the end of the season, as we were taking down the trellises and the vines, we just kept finding more and more gourds. They were still green, and I imagine that meant the seed wasn't fully mature. So I spread them out on some pallets in our seed warehouse to let them keep maturing with the intention of dealing with them eventually. But I didn't do anything with them. By the time they were dry in midwinter, we were doing other things. And so I just never extracted the gourd seed that winter of 2024 to 2025. And then it was spring and we had planting to do. Then we had more seed crops to harvest and then to clean. And those gourds sat on those pallets for 14 months. Now, a week or two ago, first week of January, I decided to start the new year by cleaning up that area of the seed warehouse and just dealing with these gourds. So first off, those dried gourds are so much lighter than the fresh green gourds. I picked them up and I used a hammer to break into the larger, thicker shelled gourds and an X-Acto for some of the thinner ones. I gathered the seeds and dried up plant insides that were inside the fruit, and then I did a quick winnow. It probably took me about 30 minutes to process that pallet and a half of fruit. and I wound up with a bunch of clean seeds. And there were some that were darker and some that were lighter. And usually when I see that color difference in seeds, I suspect that the lighter seeds won't germinate or that they're more immature. Anyway, I gave the seeds to Emily to run a germ test, and it came back at 90% within days. So I was impressed. That's a great germ rate. I was impressed on how much you can neglect a crop and it can still be successful. And we have seed for birdhouse gourds now on our online web store. So that's, I guess it's a story of New Year's resolutions and a story of procrastination that paid off. And now today's mini-sode. So this is episode 50 of the podcast, and 50 is a milestone. So I wanted to do something special for the occasion. I wanted to invite Molly Brisebois on the pod. Molly is my podcast producer. She sits in when we're recording the minisodes. She does the post-production and editing. Molly has also collaborated with me over the last couple of years to support my first ever Seed Farmer Mentorship Program, and she does other kinds of behind-the-scene things. Molly is also my sister. You might have noticed the last name. So Molly's my sister, and I'm thrilled to have her on the pod, or I'm thrilled to have you, Molly, on the pod. Hey, Molly, welcome to the Seed Farmer Podcast.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me. And also, happy Blue Monday.
Happy Blue Monday?
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Blue Monday?
Yes, that's the day that is supposed to be the most depressed day of the year.
That's right, yeah.
And I think that what I've heard about it is that it actually is just a marketing thing, or it's like it's not statistically true.
I don't think it is statistically true, but I feel maybe it's just because I have a lot of friends who are comedians. I feel like everybody's just so excited to jump on the Blue Monday bandwagon.
Maybe that's what we should have done. This is the Blue Monday episode of the Seed Farmer Podcast.
Well, I was just going to say that I'm happy to have something to do today that it's like, a little bit anxiety inducing, but also something that I can show up for. I think it's a good way to show them.
All right. Well, tell us about how you came to work on the podcast.
Okay, well, we've worked together before in the past, and I had moved back to Montreal after living in Boston for a while, and I was looking for work and wasn't really finding too much. And we talked about it a little bit, and I myself am a huge podcast fan. I love podcasts, and I love editing, so it just felt kind of like a natural thing. Like, yeah, let's give this a shot and see how it goes. And I got to say, like early on, it was hard because I hadn't done any editing work for a while. So I had to like relearn the ropes. It was like new software. But then once I got over that initial hump, I loved the work, and I still do.
Do you want to tell us a bit about your editing and communications experience?
Yeah, sure. Well, I did the communication program at Concordia. So, but actually, even before that, I remember like as kids, my friend and I would do like little stories like we did video stuff too, but I don't know how to really explain them, like stories, and we'd add sound effects and stuff. So I guess I have been kind of doing this sort of work for a while.
What does podcast post-production look like?
So sometimes I do, like you said, I sit in on some of the recordings. And so I'll have some notes to start with. And I always work off an old project. And what I'll do is I'll download the different tracks into the project. And then I tend to just edit chronologically. So, starting with the intro. And then it helps me kind of get a sense of what the pacing will actually be like. And I've got to say, like, I feel like it's really easy to edit your voice because I know where you tend to have ticks and stuff, and I can actually like see the waveforms. But it's so funny to me. What I would not have expected is like every guest, it's like a whole new experience because every person speaks so differently, and I feel like I kind of have to learn their specific vibe in order to edit them. And but actually, that's like the part I kind of like the most. Because unlike when I just listen to a normal podcast where I'm just taking the content here, I feel like I'm kind of trying to take in more the person, and how like they express themselves. And so when I'm editing, because you want to keep their vibe, but then just kind of like fine tune it, clean it up a little bit.
And I guess maybe I should have set you up with what I do is that when I'm recording a podcast, I record, I have a mic in front of me, and most of the interviews are on Zoom, and we do record on Zoom as a backup, but there's this PodTrack Zoom mini mixer thing that I use, and it will have a track for my voice and it'll have a track for the guest's voice. And so after I finish recording, I upload those to a shared file, and then that's where you take them over. So I just wanted to put that in to kind of complete the process at the beginning.
Yeah, that was a better way of putting it. Exactly. So yeah, once I have all that, I can just jump in and just I don't overall the conversation sounds pretty much the same, but I do kind of tighten the pacing a little bit. Yeah.
And when I stumble over questions or I'm not sure what to say, then you clean that up also and make me sound a lot more articulate than maybe I come off in some of the drafts.
Yeah, but I gotta say, I can tell you've been doing this for a while because you know how to retake when you speak. And so it is like you're easy to edit. Like you don't jumble all over your words. A huge compliment.
So one of the things that I'm really grateful that you do is you also choose the teasers that we put at the beginning of the episodes, because that's something that I just find it tough to figure out what to put in. And I really appreciate that you do that. How do you choose the teasers to feature?
Well, maybe this is fairly obvious. Like I go for something that I will have a reaction to. So it'll be like emotional reaction, or I'll be like, oh, that's really good, or like, that's interesting. I've also worked off of some feedback that you've given me, because like one thing you said is like try and have it be seed specific. And I was like, it sounds obvious, right? But it's like I kind of needed to hear that, like, oh yeah, it is a seed podcast. It should be seed specific. Yeah, which actually, one thing I did want to talk about is one thing that makes stuff easier. For instance, choosing the teasers, it's the collaboration component of it. It's funny because like I've done a lot of creative kind of work, and I've noticed that it's a bit of a relief working on someone else's project. So like when I'm doing something like teasers, I wonder if that's why it might feel easier for me rather than for you, is because like I don't have to worry about the vision. I can just kind of go in and do very specific things and follow your guidelines. And I don't get caught up in like my own perfectionism and trying to like endlessly work things out. I just can kind of take notes from you and just make it into what you want. So it's a bit of a relief for a creative person to work on someone else's project for a while.
Well, that's really interesting. I can see what you're saying, because I might be too close to the interview to be able to distinguish sometimes some of the key moments. So sometimes they're obvious. Sometimes like I know as we're doing it, as we're recording a conversation, that is the teaser. But other times, often I have to scratch my head to figure out where it is.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite episode moments?
One of the episodes that really struck a chord with me recently was Janice's episode where she talks about placekeeping. When I was younger, especially, I moved around so much, and it was not, I can't really think of like the reason why I was moving around so much. So it's only in more recent years that I've kind of started to appreciate the value of staying in one place. And so to hear her talk about that concept, I thought it was like such a great refresher for people. That notion of like, don't worry so much about like what's going on out there or being out there, like learn to be here first. That really struck a chord with me, and I'm really looking forward to reading her book. And another moment, I actually can't remember who said this, but it is a theme that comes back. Someone talked about saving seed as an act of rebellion.
People are quoting Ira Wallace, who has been a seed mentor to a lot of growers. And I think it's a quote that she has about seed being an act of resistance. And I think maybe Alexis and possibly Chris Smith have mentioned it.
Yeah. What I like about the idea behind that is I just feel like there is, a lot of hopelessness these days. And on this podcast, it's not the vibe I get a lot. I feel like the content is very hopeful, and it's like, wow, people are really taking things into their own hands. They're having these learning experiences. They're cultivating these like different crops. I just find that like it's a really different tone from what I'm used to hearing, and I find that really inspiring because like I should specify like I don't exist in the farming world outside of like my work with you. So I think from an outside perspective, it is so empowering to hear people talk about the work they're doing.
So you've let it slip that you don't exist specifically in the farming world, except maybe as an eater who's.
Oh, of course,
but,
yeah.
But I was going to ask, what kind of gardening experience do you have overall in your life?
Oh my gosh, yeah, like so little, probably like way less than the average person. I think my last gardening experience. Well, okay, I've had plants. I don't have plants now, but yeah, you can't overlook that. I've definitely had some plants that I was very attached to. At the moment, I don't. So, but that's really the extent of it. I haven't never grown any food.
Have your parents ever had a garden around you?
Oh yeah, and you know what? When I was little, I think I did some kind of because like I remember as a kid, mom getting me like a little gardener set. But gosh, that is so long ago.
So, with that background laid out for the public, this vulnerable moment of admitting this, what have you learned about seeds over these last episodes?
I've learned to keep crossers away from other things. And well, it's funny because I was thinking like if I had to be part of a team, I feel like I would want to do winnowing. I have a feeling that I would be good at it for some reason, like getting the right balance of like how to drop the seeds. But like in a more broad way, I definitely understand the concept of seed saving. Like I think I would have some instincts, like I would know, oh, I should probably keep these in like a dry, cool place. And I would also know enough that like where like I would probably need a book by my side, probably your book by my side. But I think I could do it. I think I could at least save like tomato seeds.
Something that you had an offhand comment when we were talking about recording this episode. You said something like, I think I could breed a new variety. Does she want to back that up as a statement?
I didn't know if I wanted to re-bring that in like false confidence. I do. I feel like I kind of get well, okay, what seems cool about breeding seed is that it seems very direct and that you can like recognize the traits that you want and then just keep breeding those plants. That concept seems pretty clear to me, but like I also know there would be like a lot of heartache and like a lot of like a lot of learning along the way that would have to happen for me to actually be able to do that.
So, what else do you do other than produce this podcast?
Well, as I mentioned, I am a little bit in the world of stand-up comedy, although I have taken like a step back from that these days. I love writing, and actually, I do want to get more into like podcast producing or recording because it really is a passion of mine. I love that world. I think, well, actually, too related to stand-up comedy, and this is something I've talked about with friends, is that it feels like podcasts are kind of like the new stand-up in the sense that it has this like real intimacy to it. Whereas I feel like stand-up used to have that, and that feels like it's kind of gone away a little bit. But when you're listening to a podcast, it feels like you're with those people. It feels like you're really getting to know people, aside from like all the content you get from it. For me, it's like the people that I'm more interested in the content itself.
I can definitely relate to that. As an avid podcast listener myself, I definitely feel like I've made some friends that I've never met.
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah.
Is there anything I should have asked you?
Well, I guess I should ask you, if you think of now versus when you were doing your first podcast episode, do you feel like a different person? Like, do you feel like your approach to it is totally different?
Yeah. When I recorded the first interviews, especially like the first 3 to 5, there was a real terror as part of it. Just like I wanted to make sure I had the right questions. I wanted to make sure I was attentive to the guest in the right way. Like, I don't know if anxiety is the right word, but terror is definitely part of it, just going into it. And then when the interviews were actually happening, it's like there's all this dead space in a way. Like, I mean, the other person's speaking. Okay, so it's not dead space for the listener. But for me as the host, I'm suddenly in a place where I'm listening for 30 seconds, for 5 or 6 minutes, depending on the exchange. And I was really not expecting that initially. I was really focused on my questions and less on the experience of the listening of the person. But that was a big learning in the first episodes. And it did give me a lot of confidence that my questions don't have to be perfect. I just have to get the person to think about something for them to start talking about. And because we're in the general concept of seeds, I know that what they're going to say is going to wind up being interesting to a seed listener. And so I'm like, my job is just to set up the person so that they can tell interesting stories. And I don't explicitly have to be the one telling the interesting story. And I think that that's something that I've had to learn over the beginning. And I guess it's now more part of my approach to when I'm hosting. Now, I mean, the first 25 episodes of this podcast were done with no-till growers, and that's before you were editing these episodes. And then the last 25 episodes have been working with you. Another thing related to that is the first 25 episodes happened over like a 2.5-year period for different reasons. And now we've gone weekly starting sometime in August or so. We've released an episode just about every week. And that means that we're recording all the time. And that's been a really great thing just to keep the content, I guess, flowing, but also like we'll record 2 minisodes or a minisode and an intro together and kind of like a little bit of batching. And that's kind of changed some of the approach about how I prepare for it. But it also keeps it, when we record 2 or 3 things in a row, usually by the second or third, I feel more warmed up and a little bit more confident.
What's also interesting about that is like when you're constantly doing things, I bet your brain is also thinking about the podcast more. I wonder if like during the week you think like, oh, I should talk about that in the intro to the next podcast or stuff like that. Like I wonder if it just becomes more of a natural process.
Yeah, it definitely becomes more of a natural process and more linked to my daily life. So we have the format. I'm not sure how clear it is to all listeners always, but we alternate episodes where we have a full-length interview episode and then a minisode. So this is a minisode right now, and then next week will be a full-length interview, and there'll be another minisode the week after. And it's been interesting, this format, because full-length interviews, it's a lot of work to book them. And they're long conversations. There's a bit more work to get ready for, and that's more editing. And we try to stack these up in advance. Like right now we have 3 or 4 up until mid-March or so we have recorded, which is a relief. And these minisodes, we've been doing them that I've been recording them myself. Well, with you, right? You've been listening, but it's been really nice to be able to do them on a quicker turnover that way. But it's also created an opportunity to pop in other quick guests. Like we did one with Julia about the book that I'm co-writing with her. There's one coming up in 2 weeks that I won't spoil the guest right now, but it's been easy to kind of just drop things in. So I've really enjoyed this format that there's kind of like some deeper conversations, but there's also the place that we've created to have shorter, more impromptu, maybe more specific conversations. Yeah, so those are just some of the evolution from my perspective. And it's been really great working with you for all kinds of reasons. One of the big ones is when I quit working with no-till growers, like I knew I could do the interview. That wasn't a problem. And I have done video editing in the past, so I know I could do the audio editing, but I was like, am I going to have the time? And it's been really great having you do this because I love the job you're doing, and I don't have to worry about that part. And so a great job is done without me having to do it. So that's made it easier to do. And it's been really great also having somebody I work with continuously that we have a close relationship anyway, but that I can get feedback that I trust. And, both positive and, you haven't been particularly harsh on anything, but it's good to have a collaborator essentially. And so that really makes it easier to do the work than to just work alone and do everything. So thank you.
Well, yeah. And I would say thank you as well. You've been such a great collaborator to work with. And I feel the same way in many ways. And this has been a great project to work on, like I said, because I get to be creative, but it's not just this thing that I have to hold like really close to my heart, like I can have a little bit of distance. And I feel like that's a bit of a relief when you're working on something.
Yeah. Well, so this is where we wrap up then?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks for having me on the podcast, Dan.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Molly. Thanks for coming on. And that's another mini-sode of the Seed Farmer Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed peeking behind the podcast with me today. Thank you to Sophie Dalton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at sophiesdalton.com. And thank you to Molly Brisebois for editing this episode and for supporting the Seed Farmer and Farmer Spreadsheet Academy with all your work, Molly. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And thank you all so much for listening. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at spreadsheet.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/support-podcast or follow the link in the show notes. If you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.